All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We've got a fun session today. Hello and welcome to Ask Echometer. So today we're discussing Echometer equipment, and we would like to provide you with some tips and best practices for care, for maintenance, and troubleshooting your equipment. So this session is going to be really helpful for field personnel and other individuals with hands-on equipment operation. So to introduce ourselves, my name is Carrie Ann Taylor, and we're very happy to be joined today by our wireless equipment technician, Edwin Bayuden. And Edwin is sitting in with Ken right now. Edwin, you want to give everybody a little wave hello? Everybody. So we're very happy to have Edwin with us today. And I also want to thank and highlight Ken Skinner, who is our knowledgeable and ever dependable support technician, and likely the person many of you have already called and counted on to help with some troubleshooting and maintenance issues you may have had, especially if you're out in the field. Also joining us is Gustavo Fernandez, who always does a wonderful job with the chat and Q&A, and he'll likely have a lot of input in today's session as well. We also have Dieter Becker, Tony Podio, and Lynn Rowland. Today we're going to kind of stick to the maintenance, to the repairs, to the troubleshooting the equipment. So if you're also new to Echometer equipment, new to acquiring data, we recently had 2 sessions on acquisition and analysis basics. So session 9 that aired on July the 15th was a dynamometer workshop, and session 10 on July 22nd was a liquid level workshop. So if you're interested in watching those sessions, if you're wanting some specific information on actually hooking up the equipment and the basics of analyzing the data, those would be some really good sessions for you to review. And of course, if you have any follow-up questions on those, you're always welcome to contact us. So next, we have our Ask Echometer webpage that's available from our Echometer homepage, www.echometer.com. And if you go out there right now, each week we have PDF bundles that you can download. So today's PDF bundle is pretty cool. We've got a lot of information, and so I'm just going to show you. If you go out to our Ask Echometer webpage, session 13, that's today, and you click on the PDF bundle, and it's kind of big. It's got some videos and other things in there, so it'll take a couple of minutes probably to download. But you'll get this folder here, Ask Echometer Session 13. And so I've got some gas gun drawings. So each one of these drawings also has, it's sort of an exploded view that has each one of the parts and also the part numbers. So it's good to have the drawings on hand. That way, if you're doing some maintenance or you have a problem, you can refer to these documents, to these drawings for whatever type of gun you have, so that you know exactly what part to ask us for. I also have the maintenance guides. There's some gas gun maintenance guides, which we're going to go through and talk about. A lot of the information that you see here, there's some recommendations for cleaning products, some of the products that we use ourselves, and so we're going to talk about those. There's additional manuals and quick references, some guides, quick references, things like that we're going to go through. And then Edwin has put together some amazing flow charts. So, again, Edwin is our wireless technician, and so he builds and repairs and helps troubleshoot the wireless equipment, wireless guns, your base stations, things like that. And so we'll get to talking about the wireless equipment here in just a bit, but he's got these flow charts for you guys to kind of go through depending on what kind of problem you're having. And so I just want to make sure that you see what we have out here. There's also this animated remote fire gas gun PowerPoint that I'll kind of step through. That'll kind of help you with some troubleshooting. So we want to provide you with as much information as we can, just to help the repair process go quickly and easily for you. If you have a problem that you're not able to repair something and you need to send your equipment into us, then also on our website, under the support tab, let's see if I can open this. You do see that. Okay, so under support, we have a submit repair form online. So if I click this online repair form, then this is where you can go in. You could type in all of your information, a little bit of information about the problem that you're having, billing information, things like that. We've got our company shipping address for you to ship your equipment to us. When you submit this, then it notifies us that you've got equipment on the way, and that way we know to look for it. And so we've got people who check that repair log daily to see what's coming in and what maybe we need to check up on. So this is an online form that you can submit to us. You might just want to print that out, put a copy of that with your equipment if you want, just to keep all the information together for us. But we do have this online repair form, which makes it a little bit easier for you guys to send stuff in. All right. So just a quick agenda here. So I'm going to start talking about the gas guns, and Ken and Edwin are going to be on hand, and they might jump in and provide a little bit more information. So we're going to try to keep this pretty laid back. All right, so we'll talk about the gas guns, then we're going to move to the wireless equipment, maintenance and troubleshooting. We'll talk about the base station, sensor behavior, signal interference, some common maintenance issues, and these will apply to both the wired and the wireless guns. Again, some recommended cleaning products. We get a lot of questions on that. What's the best thing to use? What should we absolutely not use? And so we're going to talk about that today. And then if we have time, for those of you using the well analyzer, we'll talk about troubleshooting the well analyzer, taking good care of your battery, some good charging habits to get into. We'll talk about cables, and then something called the Troubleshoot Wizard. And this is only available in TWM, so even if you are using the well analyzer with TAM, this is probably something you might want to install. This would be a good reason to have TWM installed on your laptop. That way you'll have this Troubleshoot Wizard, and it's a way for you to check your well analyzer and also your cables. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the liquid level equipment. All right, so this slide shows a picture of all of our gas guns that we have. So here you see the compact gas gun. This is a very versatile gun. It can operate in implosion and explosion modes. And for those of you who don't know what that means, we're going to cover that in just a minute, exactly what we're talking about. The working pressure on the compact gas gun is 1500 psi. It's very simple to operate and also pretty simple to maintain. The next two guns you see here, these are our remote fire guns. So we have the wired remote fire gun, and then also our wireless remote fire gun, this 2A and 2B. So both of these guns also have a working pressure of 1500 psi. Both of these guns can be fired remotely from a laptop. The wireless gun can be fired from the keypad on the gun right there. Both of these guns should only be operated by filling the volume chamber with compressed gas, so CO2 or nitrogen, and firing or exploding the shot into the well. So the remote fire guns should only be operated in the explosion mode. All three of these guns, the compact gas gun and the remote fire guns, have rugged but sensitive microphones. And so we recommend any of these guns for lower pressure wells. The working pressure is 1500 psi, but if you have lower pressure wells, you definitely want to have the more sensitive microphone. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So the next two guns you see here are the 5000 psi gas guns, or 5K guns. Here it's called the 5K guns. So these guns have a working pressure of 5000 psi. So this is the wired gun that would be hooked to cables to the well analyzer, and this is the wireless version here. The 5K gun is also versatile. It can be operated by exploding gas from or imploding gas into the volume chamber, so implosion or explosion modes. The 5K gas guns have a more rigid microphone, so they're not as sensitive as the lower pressure guns. They're used in higher pressure wells. They're recommended for use in higher pressure wells. So this last gun here is the 15,000 psi gas gun, and it works by implosion only. So it has a tiny 1 cubic inch volume chamber, and it's really only recommended for wells with higher pressures than 5,000 psi. All right, so first let's talk briefly about explosion and implosion. And when we say a gun is fired in explosion mode, that indicates an external gas supply, like the one you see pictured here, is used to fill the gas gun volume chamber with compressed gas. So again, CO2 or nitrogen, to a pressure that is higher than the well pressure. So in the illustration, the pressure in the well is 100 psi. So the gas gun volume chamber is filled with 300 pounds of pressure, so that when the gun is fired, 200 pounds of differential pressure is going to be released into the wellbore, creating the acoustic pressure wave that we see the reflections of as it travels down the wellbore. So the wired and wireless remote fire guns are both made for explosion operation only. The schematic you see here on the right-hand side represents the mechanical function, the internal function of both guns. So the wireless gun has additional operational features that we'll discuss when we talk about the wireless functionality, but the internal mechanics of the gun are the same. Now, explosion mode also means that we don't want any well gas or anything like debris or fluid inside the wellhead to implode inside the gun, mainly because it would cause damage and excessive maintenance and repairs. It would cause a lot of internal damage, a lot of internal repair, a lot of internal maintenance. So when the remote fire gas gun is placed onto the well, you want to make sure that you're charging the gas gun volume chamber to a pressure in excess of the well pressure before you open the casing valve. So this is a great PowerPoint slide that shows what goes on inside the gun when you fire a shot from a remote fire gun. This is also a great resource to use to help with troubleshooting your gun. So inside that PDF bundle is that the folder titled Remote Fire Gas Gun Animation, and it is this PowerPoint slide. So I wanted to make sure you have it in case it will help you kind of think through the gun operation to help with troubleshooting any issues that you may have. This is an older illustration. This is sort of off an older remote fire gas gun, but it's the internal operation that we want to look at here. So you have your gas gun volume chamber, you've got your pressure gauge. This represents the solenoid. You've got your bleed valve to the side here, and then your microphone at the bottom of the gun that's covered by the mic protector, right, with the threads that is actually attached to the wellhead. You have your BNC connector right here. On the wired remote fire gas guns, there is an internal wire that can be broken, right in behind this this BNC connector. So if your mic cable gets stuck or you pull too hard and break the connector off, that internal wire can break off and you'll have to send your gun in for repair so we can fix that. So we do recommend using one of those 90-degree electrical BNC connectors just to help protect the connector on the gas gun. Another component to mention is the microphone, and we'll talk about this again when we discuss the wireless equipment, but this applies to all of our gas guns. The microphone cannot be repaired in the field. You don't want to take it apart. If fluids enter inside of the microphone will be damaged. So the microphone can be replaced or it can be sent to us to be repaired or rebuilt, but there's nothing that you can really do to repair the microphone in the field other than if it happens to get moisture inside, you might be able to allow it to dry out, maybe set it in the sun and then try using it again. Right, and so we'll talk about the microphone again. But let's just take a look at this animation slide just so you can kind of see what's going on internally inside the remote fire gun when you fire a shot. Okay, so let's first look over here at the filler connector. So the first thing we're going to do is fill up our gun. So we've got our compressed gas, CO2. And so this is the end of the hose here that goes to your bottle. Okay, so we're inserting that into this filler connector right here. All right, so we're going to pressure up the gun. That first little bit of pressure is going to follow this path, and you'll see that it comes right on top of the gas valve here. So the gas valve, to get to the gas valve, you'd have to remove the volume chamber, remove the orifice housing, all the way down to get to the gas valve. And the gas valve has two O-rings on it, this larger O-ring here and a smaller O-ring. This smaller O-ring does a lot of work. So when the gas valve is on its seat, that smaller O-ring is helping provide that seal, and that's what's holding all of the pressure inside your gun. Okay, so that first little bit of pressure comes, it presses down on the gas valve, now it's on the seat, and the rest of that gas comes up through this orifice right? Here's the orifice housing and the orifice up into your volume chamber. All right, so now we've pressured the gun. So next thing we're going to do is activate that solenoid to fire the shot. Okay, so, if you're using the well analyzer, once you click fire shot, or if you're operating the wireless gun, you click fire shot. And so now that the solenoid is activated, we're sending 12 volts to the solenoid. And so what it's going to do is there's a little spring in there. It's going to activate that spring and pull that dart valve back. Okay, so currently this little dart valve here is closing off that path. When it's pulled back, that's going to release the pressure on top of the gas valve. And there's a tiny little hole on the side of your remote fire guns. You've probably seen that. And so that's a little pressure relief hole. And so that little bit of pressure from on top of the gas valve is released out that hole, which allows the gas valve to come off the seat. And so now all of that pressure in the volume chamber can leave the gun. So if you've got, a couple of problems that we see is if you're filling up the gun, and as soon as you're filling up the gun, when you pull the hose out of the filler connector, the gas just comes right back out at you, right? So there's a couple of things. And you think about the operation and what happens. So it could be, you could have something, there's a little valve core in here that could be, maybe it needs to be replaced. Possibly if the gas valve, you can sometimes hear that gas valve when it goes on the seat, maybe your orifice is clogged. And so the pressure is not able to get up inside the volume chamber. And so it's just blowing right back out at you. This dart valve could have some debris on it. And so it's not able to close off that path. And so you're losing that gas pressure out that weep hole. Possibly you're losing gas out the bottom of the gun, right down here. Maybe you've got a damaged O-ring, or maybe this O-ring has been damaged or blown off or cut, and so it's not able to provide a good seal, and so you've got gas leaking out the bottom of the gun. Another thing to remember with the gas valve, this O-ring right here, anytime you have to get inside the gun and do any maintenance, you want to make sure that you're lubricating where you have the O-rings. If this gas valve gets too dry, then that could cause your gas valve to get stuck, and so it's not able to fully operate properly. And so all of these things will cause your gun to fail. You're going to have leaks. You'll have the gas blowing back out at you. One other thing to remember, though, and so I added this little illustration here of the end of that hose. When you've got your canister and you're charging your gun, it could also be that there's a problem with the hose. Okay, so before you get into tearing apart the gun, you might want to take this, take a look at the nipple on your hose. You might want to take that apart, make sure that you've got your O-ring, your little washer. There's a bunch of tiny little components in there, and any one of those can mess up the operation of just getting the gas inside the gun.
Okay.
Right, so
even the order can mess it up.
Yes, please go ahead.
Just even the order can cause it to be a problem. So if you lose one or they're out of order, it'll cause it to leak, and you may not expect it to be leaking, even though all the parts are there.
Right, so that's another reason why it's really important to have your schematics there, just to make sure that you're getting everything put back together in the same order. Same thing with the solenoid and the plunger. There's tons of parts in there. You want to make sure you get them all back in the right order so that it can operate properly. Any other comments, guys, so far?
Yeah, this is Ken, but on the bottom of the hose, it's pointed in the downward direction. And the reason that you point it in the downward direction whenever you take it off is so any of those parts don't fall out. If the hose is pointed up, then as you take the connector off, the washer will fall out and you'll lose it.
And you also want to make sure with that hose that you're not dragging it through dirt. If you get any dirt or particles or anything inside that hose here, and then you go to fill up your gun, whatever sand or debris, anything you have in there, you're kind of shoving inside your gun, and that's gonna cause you some problems too. So on our webpage, we do have a video. I don't want to take too much time and show all of it, but if you go to our website, you'll see this video here. So here he's replacing the thread protector. that goes over the microphone. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your thread protector in good condition. So the dart valve is that tiny little valve, and if it has any debris or anything on it, it's not going to be able to seal off that path. And so you'll feel the gas come out that weep hole on the side. So he's going to show us how to get in and clean that dart valve. So we send repair kits along with all of the guns. And if you've got an older gun and you don't have your repair kit, please let us know so that we can get some repair kits to you. The repair kits contain all of the tools that you'll need to get in, and if you need to replace any O-rings, things like that. It includes the tools. It includes any screws you need, as well as any O-rings. And so if you just let us know you need to order a repair kit and what type of gun you have, then we can go ahead and get that to you. So Rusty's showing us where the dart valve is. We've got a great little focus on the dart valve. And so you can see there's just tiny little fragments that get around that dart valve and prevent it from making the seal and doing its job. And so if you've got a dart valve that's dirty, you need to go in and clean it. You can just use that. You can even just use your shirt, just use a rag, something just to wipe off that tip and get it nice and clean. Once it's clean, then you can reassemble that solenoid assembly. So there he's using that spanner wrench. So after you clean your dart valve, if the gas gun still leaks, then you might need to go in and check out the plunger assembly underneath the dart valve. So here he's removed the dart valve seat, kind of checking for debris, making sure that O-ring's in good condition. You can spray contact cleaner around and inside there to make sure it's nice and clean, free of debris. All right, so if you're not able to hold positive pressure, you fill up the gun and you start seeing it leak out, or you notice that you've got gas leaking out of the bottom of the gun, then this is where you might need to go in and take a look at that gas valve. So the gas valve is when you first pressure up the gun, that first little bit of pressure presses on top of that gas valve and gets it on the seat. So if you're leaking out of the bottom of the gun, it could be a problem with your gas valve, it could be a problem with one of the O-rings, or it could be a problem with your orifice. Okay, so the orifice is where after that first little bit of gas pushes down the gas valve, the rest of it goes up through the orifice. So all of this, when you get into this complete assembly here, are things that you want to check and make sure that they're free of debris. You want to make sure that they're in good condition. And we have some great pictures to kind of show you a little bit further along here what some problems you can run into if you've got a clogged orifice, things like that. So here you see I'm replacing that O-ring on the bottom of the gas valve, and that's the one that does the most work there. And you want to make sure that you're replacing it with the right O-ring. So all of our O-ring kits come with a little diagram just showing which O-ring and which part number. So again, you want to make sure you've got your drawing to make sure that you're putting the right you're putting the right O-ring on the part. Because there's a ton of O-rings in those little repair kit bags. All right, so here he's pointing at the orifice that's inside that orifice housing there. So you can use WD-40 or some kind of contact cleaner, spray through there, make sure that it's clear of any debris, make sure it's free, it's not clogged. All right, so you've checked your gas valve, the O-rings, make sure that it's lubricated, check your orifice and orifice housing, make sure that it's clear, make sure that it's clean, it's not damaged. You put all that back together, and then your volume chamber goes on top. So if you get stuck, you want to go in and see how everything was repaired, then you can always refer to that video there. All right. So let's move on to implosion. So the compact gas gun and the 5000 gas gun can be used for implosion operation. So this means you would use the well pressure to generate the pulse. So the illustration shows a well pressure of 300 psi. With an implosion gun, you've got two options. You can either go ahead and cock the gun or close the path to the volume chamber. And then when you manually fire the gun, you'll have 300 pounds of pressure blown into the volume chamber from the wellhead. Or kind of what you see here, if you've got 300 pounds of pressure on the well, you can go ahead and, once you've attached the gun, go ahead and open the valve between the gun and the well and equalize the pressure to the pressure in the gun. So you would have 300 pounds of pressure on the gun, which would be equalized to the pressure in the well. Then you can cock the gun or close off that path to the volume chamber and use the bleed valve on the gun to bleed off the pressure differential. And so now when the gun is fired, that differential pressure will be blown inside the volume chamber. That'll create that pressure wave that travels down the wellbore. So with implosion, an external gas supply isn't necessary, which is nice. We do recommend when you're performing an implosion shot with the 5000 psi gas gun that there is at least 100 to 200 pounds of pressure on the well. So we have a well outside of town here where we do a lot of testing. It's the V11 well, and it currently maintains around a pressure of 70 psi. So we can perform an implosion shot on the well using the 5K gun, but the detail is really low and the liquid level appears almost like a lazy kick rather than that sharp kick and shot detail that you'd like to see. All right, so compact gas gun. The compact gas gun is manually fired. It's easy to use, it's easy to clean, and easy to maintain. Just like the remote fire gun, the microphone and the mic protector are located here at the bottom of the gun that's connected to the wellhead. And again, you want to make sure that you protect those housing threads from damage. So you want to apply Teflon tape around the threads on any of the mic protectors on any of the guns before threading it onto the wellhead. So the volume chamber on the compact gas gun is right here. You see the volume chamber. This is the gas valve. It has a little O-ring. This is the cocking arm. So when you cock the gun, you push up on this lever, which pushes down on this gas valve here, and then you have an O-ring that helps provide that seal. Then once you're ready to fire the shot, here's the trigger, and so you just pull on that trigger pull and that fires the shot. Also, you'll see here, this is the filler bleed valve. So if you ever need to remove this valve for maintenance, you have to make sure you reinstall it correctly. If it's too far out or you don't screw it in far enough, either it's not going to bleed any pressure off at all, or it's going to continuously blow all of the pressure out of the volume chamber. So this is the filler bleed valve here, and so I just wanted to show you the components behind it. So sometimes you might need to go in and change out that valve core or change out that O-ring. You want to make sure that you get the components back in the right way, but you'll see this stop pin and stop pin spring. And so you can feel that right there. And so as you're reinstalling that filler bleed valve, you can push in that stop pin just using your thumb or your fingernail and keep twisting that in, kind of keep screwing that in. But again, just be aware of how far in or how far out you let that go, because when you want to bleed off some pressure, you want to make sure that it opens just enough, and then you can turn it back to close it off. So when you operate the compact gas gun in explosion mode, you would close the gas valve on the gun, right? So you go ahead and cock the gun to close off that gas valve before opening up the valve between the gun and the well. So you'd fill the gun with pressure, right? You'd fill the gun here with pressure, and then when you're ready to fire the shot, you'll manually pull that trigger. When you operate the gun in implosion mode, the gun is already attached to the wellhead, and again, you've got two choices. You can go ahead and cock the gun, which will close that gas valve, and open the valve between the gun and the well. So now you've got no pressure inside the gun. You've got all the pressure sitting right there at the gun. So pulling that trigger will lift the gas valve, and all of the well pressure, plus whatever debris or fluid happens through right there at the wellhead, will enter the volume chamber. And so that'll create that pressure wave that travels down the wellbore. Or you can install the gun on the wellhead with the gas valve open. You go ahead and open the valve between the gun and the well so that the pressure gauge on the gun reads the same pressure as on the wellhead. Then you use that bleed valve on the gun to bleed the pressure off to a particular pressure differential inside the volume chamber. So now when you pull the trigger, that differential pressure from the well enters the gun, creating your pressure wave. This is very easy to clean out. It's a very easy gun to use. Just keep in mind, if you use it in implosion often, you want to make sure that you're maintaining your gas valve O-ring. You want to make sure that you're cleaning out the inside of that volume chamber. Okay, because it will probably take a lot more cleanup, because that first time when you implode from the well, anything that happens to be right there at the wellhead is going to get blown inside your gun. So please keep that in mind. You want to keep that microphone clean and the inside of your gun clean. So the last gun that we'll talk about in this section, and then we'll move on to the wireless, is the 5,000 PSI gas gun. The 5K gun is normally used in the implosion mode. So when we talk about acoustic velocity and the pressure wave traveling down the well bore, one thing to remember is that the sound travels really well in higher pressures. So it typically doesn't take such a large pressure differential. So if you'll notice, the volume chamber is about half the size of the compact gas gun and the remote fire gas gun. And that's why, because the sound travels better in higher pressure wells. With this 5K gun, here is the 1/2-inch NPT threads. This is where you connect to the well. So again, you want to make sure and use some type of Teflon tape to protect those threads. Here is the microphone connector, and there's a little BNC 90 there. The microphone is housed inside this section of the 5K gun. And then you've got 3 ball valves here. So we have a 1/2-inch ball valve. This is the ball valve that you would rotate 180 degrees to fire the shot. Here you have the volume chamber. There's your pressure gauge. So this is the charge valve. This is where you would attach your hose. So while you're charging the gun, you would want to have this valve open. You'd want to have this valve closed so that we're closing off the volume chamber. This is the bleed valve, so you'd want to make sure that's closed. And so here you're filling the volume chamber to a particular pressure that you would see on this pressure gauge here. Once you fill it to a particular pressure, if you wanted to bleed pressure off, this is your bleed valve here. And when you're ready to fire the shot, you want to make sure that you're rotating this valve 180 degrees. If you only turn it 90 degrees, then it just causes a lot of extra noise. A lot of times the beginning of the shot being fired, isn't registered correctly by the software. So it can cause some problems with your analysis and with the results that you get from firing that shot. So you want to make sure that you're rotating that ball out just a quick, easy motion so you get that nice sharp kick that you're looking for when you fire the shot. To use it in the implosion mode, you would have the volume chamber closed off here. Make sure your bleed valve is closed, your charge valve is closed. Once you've connected the gun to the wellhead, you would have this ball valve open, so you'd have it in line with the gun. And so you would open the valve between the gun and the well and equalize the pressure. So the pressure you read on the gun pressure gauge would be the same pressure you would read at the well. Then you would close the ball valve here, the 1/2-inch ball valve. So now we've isolated the volume chamber. So we want to create a pressure differential. So this is where you would open up the bleed valve, bleed off a certain pressure differential, close it back off, and then when you're ready to fire the shot, rotate that ball valve 180 degrees, and that pressure differential is going to shoot inside the gun. All right, so that's going to cause your pressure wave. So this next slide here is about the direction of kick. And, we're not planning on spending a lot of time discussing analysis or interpreting shots today, but I did want to add this in here. So if you're switching from implosion to explosion shots, the direction of kick will be inverted. The software is going to automatically think you're taking an explosion shot unless you tell it otherwise. So if you are taking an implosion shot and you see up kicks where you were expecting to see down kicks, then you need to let the software know that you took an implosion shot. And you can do that either in your shot setup or in your details after the shot's been taken. All right, so do pay attention to the direction of kick if you're using an implosion shot, because that is going to make a difference. Also, do you see this cap with the rubber bulb? This is called a test cap. And one of these is sent out with every gas gun that we sell. So If you set your gun up in what we call a bench test setting, meaning you can do this in your office, you can do this in your truck or tailgate, whatever. Say you're having a problem with your microphone sensitivity, or maybe you're not seeing a fluid level shot registered when the gun is fired. That's what these test bulbs are for. And so you can set up this bench test setting, and we'll talk about this again with the wireless equipment here in just a minute, but you can either tap the end of your gun with your hand to see a response in the software, or you can squeeze and release the rubber bulb on the test cap and see the response. All right, so when you squeeze it, you should see a down kick, and when you release, you should see an up kick. And so that tiny little bit of pressure, just from squeezing and releasing that bulb, should register in your software. And so that's going to help you know if maybe you're trying to troubleshoot a microphone issue or something like that. So that's what this little PVC cap is. That's our test cap. So let's switch over to talk about wireless equipment. So we're going to talk about the base station, the wireless gun, troubleshooting signal strength issues, look at some common operational issues, and then some recommended cleaning products. So here's the wireless equipment. So you see the gas guns here. This is a wireless pressure transducer, and it's separate from the pressure transducer. It's inside the wireless gun itself. We do have some dynamometer equipment here, and we're not really talking too much about the dynamometer sensors because there's not a lot of repairs that you can do as far as field repairs or anything with the PRT or the load cells, other than to tell you when you're cleaning the equipment, make sure that you're not spraying cleaning products directly on the sensors where that might get inside the electronics. Now with the PRT on wired and wireless, as far as preventive measures, just to make sure you're not damaging any of the wires. So our technician Rusty builds these, and there's tiny little semiconductors, these little wires that are, when you see them, it's like a strand of hair. They're super tiny. And so he has to look through a microscope when he's wiring up the PRTs. And if it gets really hot, he's got a wax coating that's covering those, and then he's got several layers of tape, to provide some insulation. But if it gets really hot and you allow that wax in there to melt a little bit, you pick it up and your thumb kind of mushes through the wax there, then you run the risk of possibly damaging those wires inside there, and so you'd have to send that for repair. Another thing you want to make sure and do is make sure that you're installing it on the wellhead in the correct location so that when you start the unit up, the PRT doesn't come down and hit the top of the wellhead, right? So we see that happen quite a bit. So you want to make sure that you're installing it properly. But as far as maintenance and repairs on it, just try to take good care of it, keep it clean, and send it in to us or give us a call if you have any issues. So with the wireless equipment, it's all about communication, right? We're talking about the communication, the signal strength, the sensors, and so everything sort of revolves around the base station. So one thing that we want to make sure and make clear, the base station basically represents your well analyzer and all of your cables. And so even though it's this little yellow blocks in plastic, we really want to stress that this is probably one of the more expensive sensors that you have, right? So this is what holds the license. This is what holds the key to all of the communication. This is what connects to your laptop. So because the license is in there, if you lose the base station, it's not just a receiver or a router that can be easily replaced, right? So you want to make sure that you're keeping tabs on your base station. We've had phone calls come in before where people said, hey, we lost that little yellow box. Can you send us a couple? And, we have to tell them the price of the base station and kind of what it represents. And just make sure you keep it safe. You don't accidentally step on it, things like that. So anyway, just want to kind of make that point. So the base station operation, when you've got the base station plugged into your laptop, you've got two green lights that you'll see on the side there between the antennas. So you'll see a powered light that's going to be full on green, meaning it's going to stay on all the time. And then you have this status light that's sort of this blinking green light. And so that's what you should see, normal operation of your base station when you first plug it in. If your base station is not connecting, or you're looking at TAM, you're waiting for the software to connect to it and you're having some problems, there's a couple of things you can do. Number one, verify that your USB cable is in good working condition. And so this is the USB cable here, and you can see that basically it's a printer cable. And so I've been in the situation before where I was having a problem with my cable, and I got the printer cable and tried it out. It's the same type of cable. So if you're in a bind, that's one thing you could do is try replacing the USB cable. Make sure that the cable is plugged into a working USB port on your laptop, on your PC. So I have a laptop that has a USB port that it just will not see the base station. And so most laptops have 2 or 3 ports, and so you may need to just try a different port. It could be that the driver wasn't installed correctly when the TAM software was installed. Maybe that needs to be reinstalled. So make sure that you're checking the port. You might just need to use a different port on your laptop. While we're on the subject of cables and plugging these in, as far as the base itself, you don't have to charge it separately. It's powered when it's plugged into your laptop. And we get a lot of questions about this. It looks like a charger connector, honestly, but it's not. It has absolutely no functionality. So you don't have to worry about charging your base station. We're probably looking at getting a plug put on that or some kind of a cover on that in the near future. So I just want to mention that. And then a soft reset on your base station is basically just unplug it and plug it back in. Or you may need to restart TAM, or you may need to restart your laptop. Sometimes restarting your laptop will go ahead and fix whatever problem you might have with your drivers. So, sometimes you might just need to restart your laptop too. When we have a new version of software come out, sometimes that includes firmware updates too. And firmware updates means updates that happen directly to the base station or directly to your gun or your dynamometer sensor. It might be a firmware update to the sensors itself. And when we were going from TAM 1.4 to 1.6, there was a significant firmware update, and there might be another one coming up soon. And so one of the things that we did was in TAM 1.6, there is a sort of a troubleshoot wizard for the base station. There is some help to help install the firmware on the base station. So I won't go through all the steps here, and it's several slides just to save time, but we do have the steps here for you. If you ever do happen to see your base station, if you'll see right up here, there's a blinking red light. If you see that happen, you might need to go in and try a reset on the base station. And you can follow these steps here. You just need a paper clip. You press that paper clip in while you're plugging in the USB cable, and TAM's going to sense that. Okay, so it's going to say, are you having a problem with your base station? And it's going to help go through steps to reinstall the firmware and get your base station operating again. All right, so if you're having any problems with that, though, you're always welcome to give us a call. Edwin probably has some good tips and troubleshooting tips for that too. So when you turn on your wireless sensors, there's a particular power on sequence that you'll see, and it's the same on the wireless guns and on the dynamometer sensors, on the pressure transducer as well. So this is an older membrane switch, but we're just looking at the behavior of the light. So when you turn it on, you'll press the power button, and you're going to see it flash green, flash red, and then the power button is going to flash really quickly one time for every 10% of power that you have remaining on that sensor. So if it flashes, I think here it flashed 3 times, that means you got 30% power, right? Or if it flashes 9 times, you've got 90% power remaining. So that's what it should do whenever you first power on the sensor. If your sensor is not responding, to turn it off and turn it on again, if you hold that power button down for 3 seconds, it's going to turn the device off, and press the button again and it'll power back on. You can also do a hard reset on those sensors. And so to do that, you want to hold down that power button for 8 to 10 seconds. The device will power off and reset. And then when you turn it back on, hopefully that will overcome any problems that you were having. So what we mean by beacon mode is if you've got your sensor turned on and it goes through its power up, and now it's sitting there, and you're going to see that power button flashing. All right, so normal operating mode, the sensor flashes approximately once per second. Okay, so if it's been sitting there for a while and you're not sending it any commands from TAM, anything like that, After about 5 minutes, it's going to go into a hibernation mode. And so this is for power save. We've got a lot of really efficient power saving has been put into these sensors. A lot of thought behind that just to help save power, save battery. So after about 5 minutes, now the sensor will flash once approximately every 4 seconds. Well, once it goes into that hibernation mode, it's not constantly sending a ping out to your base station, right? So it's not getting a constant update. And so you're going to see 0 signal strength there, all right? So that just means it's in hibernation mode. Just go press the power button to get that going again, and then you'll see your signal strength come back to normal. That'll wake it back up. All right, so when you fire your gun, your power button, of course, is always going to be flashing. You're going to click Start New Test, or you're going to press the Acquire button on the gun itself. The Acquire button LED light begins flashing quickly. The Fire button light flashes with the power button. And while that's flashing, the capacitor is charging, and it's charging. It's ready to get enough power to fire that solenoid. So the Fire button LED turns a solid green when it's ready to fire. And this will typically take around 9 seconds, 9 to 15 seconds. And there are some variations that may occur due to your solenoid version or software version. So here's just a quick video, and I know it's a little blurry. You can see my kid's artwork in the back. But so here we're ready to take a shot. So let me start this up here. So I'm going to click Start New Test. So when I click Start New Test, the Acquire button is flashing and the Take Shot button is grayed out. And now you see the Fire button flashing. So once that Fire button, or once that capacitor is fully charged and you've got enough power now to fire the shot, it's going to fire that solenoid, you click that Fire button and you'll immediately register that you've fired that shot. All right, so if you click that Acquire button, or you click that Start New Test button, and that Acquire button starts flashing and the Fire button starts flashing, and you're waiting and it's been more than about 15, 16 seconds, then that's going to indicate you've got a problem. All right, so 100% shutdown occurs when your wireless sensor is inactive for 1 hour. That's just built in for the power save. Flashing red LEDs on the wireless sensor means that there's a problem. And a lot of times you'll see this happen at boot up, right? You'll turn it on and you'll see the red lights flashing. So probably it's a bad boot up or a problem with the sensor board. So we suggest you do a hard power down. So hold that power button down for 8 to 10 seconds and then initiate that power up cycle again. After a few attempts, if you're still getting all 3 red LEDs flashing all the time, you should just go ahead and send it back to us, or pick up the phone and call tech support and talk to Ken or talk to Edwin, and they can kind of help you walk through some troubleshooting and see if you do need to go ahead and send your gun back into us to get fixed. All right, charging your equipment. This is important. The charging port is located right here behind this plug on the housing. You'll just pull that directly out and you'll see the charger port in there. And so we label the guns now. Edwin puts labels on there where the charger port is located, but we have had some instances where it wasn't clear where that charger port was, and so some operators have tried to get into the electronics and things like that to try to find where to put batteries or where to charge things at. So the charger port's located right behind that plug, and we have this plug here for a reason. It has a very specific and important purpose, which is to keep moisture from getting inside the gun. So that was a vulnerable point on our first versions of the gun. The charger port was a vulnerable point for moisture to enter the gun. And so this is a really good solution for that, but the plug has to be in there when the gun is operating. You got to make sure it's in there to keep it free of moisture, free of debris, things like that. So, all right, so equipment should be fully charged within about 5 hours. And as far as how long it lasts, we have some people say they charge their equipment once a month. It kind of depends on how often you're using it. So be aware of your battery percentage. This is mostly a problem that we found in older versions. When the operator would plug in the charger, then TAM immediately showed that it was fully charged. And so we were seeing a lot of battery failures. So this has been fixed in newer versions. If you're using an older version of TAM, we really recommend that you go ahead and update. We're on version 1.7 now, and we'll hopefully have a newer version coming out pretty soon. These are 2 pictures here of guns that we received for repair. This first one here, you want to make sure that the equipment is stored securely to prevent damage. The first version of the guns that we had going out had this breakaway foam in the box, but long term, it just doesn't hold up. And so we do have molded foam now for all of the guns, for all of the equipment. So if you have the breakaway foam and it kind of looks like this, please let us know. Give us a call, let us know so that we can send you the molded foam, because we want to make sure that you're able to store your equipment securely and safely. You know, with the wireless equipment, you've got antennas sticking out, you've got different things that can cause some problems, and so we want to make sure that you're storing everything properly. You also want to make sure that you are not storing it in any place where moisture can possibly enter the gun and cause problems. So I know it's probably difficult to see, but if you see this darker area around here, this is water. And this was a gun that we received from a customer. And the gun was sitting inside a water-soaked case. You've got to make sure that you're storing it properly, that you're not storing it where moisture is going to get in and damage your sensors. So on the older guns, if you have a remote fire gun, a wireless gun, with any of the components that you see on this screen here, if you send your gun to us, Edwin will make the modifications and the upgrades to the gun so that you've got better moisture prevention. It's just a better version of the gun. So we've been able to make some modifications and some upgrades and some improvements. And so we want to make sure that you have the latest improvements that we have available. I won't spend a whole lot of time here, but this was the older battery. The label on the battery allowed moisture to get behind that. This is the older charger. All right, so this is what we've replaced with the new charger with the plug on top of it. All right, so we have a good solid seal. And this is a membrane switch keypad. And so we were finding moisture and oil could soak in and get inside the electronics here. All right, so here's the new charger plug. This is the new keypad, stainless steel keypad. Just kind of moving on here, a couple of different problems that we get from customers. So number one, we're getting a weak signal. All right, so let's talk about signal strength. So if you look at this picture right here, they sort of cemented the antenna to the electronics housing. And the reason that that was loose, if you look at the board here, this is the antenna, and it's soldered onto the board with these prongs here. And so if your antenna is loose, then it's likely broken loose from the board. All right, so you've got to send that in to us so that Edwin can go in and re-secure that, that antenna connector right here. Some more troubleshooting as far as the low signal strength. Does the antenna feel loose at the connector? Again, it may have broken loose from the board. Are you running a gas gun and dynamometer sensor? Are both sensors displaying low signal strength or just one of them? So this is where you can kind of start to troubleshoot where your problem is. If you've got a gas gun and a dynamometer and they both are showing low signal strength, then it might be a location problem. If you've got a gas gun and a dynamometer and the dynamometer shows full strength and the gas gun is showing low signal strength, check your antenna. Maybe it's a problem with maybe it's a sensor problem. When I say location problem, if you're in an area where, if you've got a SCADA system or you see the big antennas and things like that, if you've got a lot of signal interference, then that's going to affect the signal strength that you have between your sensors and your base station. So where is your base station positioned? The line of sight between the sensor and the base station is extremely important. So you want to make sure that there's no obstructions near the base station or between the sensors and the base station. There are some, if you've got your base station, a lot of people have the base station just sitting on their dashboard. You can put Velcro, just stick your base station up there, and that's perfectly fine if you've got good line of sight. Make sure that there's nothing in the way. But we have seen some types of window tint, right? So some types of window tint will interfere. There is some signal interference because of certain types of window tint, right? So that might be something to think about. If you go out in the field with Ken Skinner, on the bottom of his base station, he has a magnet. And so when he gets out of the vehicle, he'll just slap the base station on the side of his vehicle so that he's got good line of sight. All right, so just make sure you don't drive off with it on there, right, Ken?
That's correct.
That's right. Okay. So another thing that you can do to kind of troubleshoot with signal strength is, are you using the short antenna or the long antenna? Try the short antenna on the base station and the long antenna on the sensor. And the thought behind this is, if you have the longer antenna on the base station, then that's just sort of amplifying the signal that the base station is able to pick up. If you have the shorter on the base station and the longer on the sensor, then you're magnifying what the sensor's sending out. All right, so that might help with some interference. And you want to make sure that your antenna are positioned straight up. Are there any other signals broadcasting in the area? To help with the signal interference, there is something that's really cool in the software, and it's called the clear channel. And so you might try a different channel. So Edwin has some nice and easy steps here for you to follow how to access your clear channel. So in the TAM software, if you click on up that upper left-hand corner, click on Setup Hardware, and then you'll see the laptop with that picture of it connected to the base station. And if you click on your Details button there, that brings up a details screen. And if you look down under the radio frequency channels section, there's a long button here. It says Run Clear Channel Assessment. So if you click on that button, you'll see here that default channels used by the sensors are 15 and 26. Once you click that Run Clear Channel Search, it does sort of a sweep of the area. All right, and so you can see here, it's looking at the noise, and it identifies which channels have the least amount of interference or noise, which would be more clear. And so if you'll see down here, once it's done with its sweep, and sometimes it takes a couple of minutes, you'll see the current channels and then a recommended channel. If TAM, after it's done its signal sweep, determines that there may be channels with less amount of traffic, so that you can have a better signal between your sensor and your base station. All right, so if you go with the recommended change, you'll want to click Apply. All right, and then so hopefully that will help with your signal strength. We do recommend, if it does recommend new channels, that you don't choose two channels that are right next to each other, because that's just going to cause additional interference. So we do recommend that you choose channels that are at least one channel apart. All right, so keep that in mind. All right, so we talked about, I mentioned the bench test a little bit earlier. So you can bench test the equipment, meaning you've got your laptop, you've got your equipment set up, you have everything on just like you would at the well, except you don't have to plug it into the wellhead, right? You can still look at the signal strength. So if you're having signal strength issues in the field, come back to the office, bench test the equipment at the office, or at an area separate from the location where you were having that signal strength issue. If the test works at the office, then there's likely some outside interference at the well site. All right, so this is just to help you troubleshoot. Or this is one of our favorite things, take a video of the acquisition and email it or text it to us. Nothing shows us the problems that you're having like a video. So you can always do that too, and we absolutely welcome that. This is caused by over tightening the antenna. All right, so here you see little prongs are broken off. Here the antenna is broken off. All right, these have little cracks in the solder there. All right, so if it's a little bit loose, don't over tighten it. It's probably already broken. All right, so here you see broken antenna. Yeah, broken antenna jack.
I've had a repair that came in. The guy changed his antenna on both the base station and the device, and he was still having problems. So if you do replace your antenna and you got a good working antenna, just throw away the antennas that are broken, because the next guy might use it if he's still having a problem. I ended up replacing 3 antennas. That kind of solved the problem. So
Thanks. All right, so what happens if your wireless device will not turn on? Here we have a picture of an old membrane switch. Right, so the old membrane switch gives false indication of a bad battery. Oil and moisture can get in between those membrane layers, rendering that switch inoperable. So if you have this switch, if you have this on your gun, please send that in so we can get that updated for you. And so here you have a picture here where moisture has entered inside the electronics housing here. You see some corrosion, all right? So that moisture can really cause a lot of problems. And so we want to make sure that you're taking all the measures possible to protect your equipment from harm that moisture can cause from moisture getting inside the gun. Another problem you might have is if you go to do your zero offset and you have very high or very low offsets. So this can be caused by moisture getting inside the gun. Maybe you have a failed pressure transducer. Does anyone have any additional comments on this?
You see the same thing when you have a wired gun, that when you do a zero offset, you know, the zero offset can be off a little bit if it's wet, and then be off quite a bit more if it's a broken cable or a bad connection. So this is a good test.
Carrie Ann,
Yes, sir.
I've also seen something that you don't have on the slide here, but
Okay.
I've also seen where the coefficients has disappeared. So you might want to check your coefficients and see if your C2 is still there. If it's not, then we can send you the coefficient with instructions how to replace the coefficient.
Perfect. Prior to opening the well valve, you want to make sure that you pressure up your gun. This is the Echometer rule of thumb, 100 to 250 psi greater than the well pressure. There's a couple of things. Number one, prevents debris from entering the gun. So as we saw before when we're looking at everything going on inside the gun, you want to make sure and protect the internal operation of the gun from getting damaged. So the best way to do that is to make sure that you pressure up your gun before you open the valve between the gun and the well. Now we say that the pressuring the gun to 100 and 250 pounds over the well pressure. Again, that's a rule of thumb. If it's the first time you've gone to a well, maybe you're not really sure how much pressure you're going to need. It's just a good starting place. And we'll talk next week. We're going to talk about shooting fluid levels on difficult wells, and we'll talk more about this next week as far as if you need to add more pressure or less pressure. But the point here is you want to make sure you have pressure on the gun before you open up the valve between the gun and the well. So why do you want to pressure your gun? So Edwin has some great pictures here. These are some examples of fluid getting up inside the gun here. Right, so this is the bleed valve port. This is the orifice and the orifice housing. What you're seeing here would be if you were to remove the volume chamber off of your wireless gun and you're looking down inside. All of this debris and this liquid you see here has been forced up inside the gun, around the gas valve, right through the orifice and up into the volume chamber. So you want to prevent this from happening. All right, so here we're seeing inside the volume chamber. This is the pressure gauge. Lots of junk and buildup there. All right, so the next common problem that we see, my gun won't fire. So we've got a little troubleshooting list here. Is the fire button continuing to flash and it's not ever coming full on? Is the take shot button remaining grayed out? That could be an indication that you've got an older solenoid, or that your solenoid is going out or has gone out. And sometimes you can see that about to occur. You know, if you notice that once you click that acquire button, or you clicked, start new test, and you notice that it takes, maybe it used to take 8 seconds and now it takes 12, now it takes 15, that might be something that you can see happening intermittently until the solenoid fails. But that is something to keep in mind. Typically, if the take shot button is grayed out, it could be a solenoid problem, and we'll look at some different solutions there. Is your battery percentage too low? So if, like most equipment, if it's running on battery power, when you fire the shot, once you click that acquire button and that you see that fire button flashing, you've got that capacitor in there. And so it's trying to build up enough energy to fire the shot. Well, if the battery percentage is too low, it may not have the capability to do that, right? So you want to make sure, we recommend that if your battery percentage gets to around 30%, go ahead and find a power source and go ahead and recharge that battery. Does it work if you fire it from TAM? Or, does it work one way and not the other? Is it a software issue or is it a sensor issue? Is your keypad or switch in good condition? Again, if you've got that older style membrane switch, likely that's probably gone bad. Has the gun been exposed to moisture? Or is it a possible mechanical problem, like what we've kind of talked about before? Is it just something internally that's not working properly? Is it a problem with the gas valve getting stuck, something like that? All right, so if your take shot button is grayed out, again, it shouldn't take more than about 15 seconds or so. If it will not fire, one of the problems you have now is that you've got pressure on your gun and you're not able to fire that shot. So you can manually fire the gun and the shot can be acquired, but you want to make sure and send that in to us for to take a look at it and likely replace your solenoid. Here you see solenoid damage. So here the solenoid's been damaged. The wireless connection here for the solenoid into the gun is not able to connect properly. And Edwin, do you want to talk about the O-ring on the solenoid, or Ken?
Originally when we received the gun or the solenoid, there was an O-ring attached to this connector, and we found out later that the O-ring is interfering with the connectivity between the connector on the solenoid and the connector on the gun. So we decided to remove the O-ring to get a better, I guess, to get the two connectors closer to each other. So, so if you're having a problem with the take shot button coming on, there might be an O-ring in there. If there is, go ahead and remove it. If you're still having a problem, go ahead and send it, and I'll do some modification to get the gun going.
All right, thank you, Edwin.
You're welcome.
Okay, so to fire the gun manually, clamp the gun or get it in a vise. Make sure that the bottom of the gun is pointed away from anything. It's not necessary when the gun is attached to the well. So if you're at the well, you've got the gun hooked up and you need to manually fire the remote fire gun, this is what you can do. So you can remove that filler connector housing. All right, that's what this one is. It has a little filler tube in there. Remove that filler connector housing, and so that's going to expose that valve core. So there's a valve core tool that you can use to depress that valve core, or I think some people even use, I probably shouldn't say, sometimes you can turn this filler connector housing around and use this little tube to depress the valve core, but you want to make sure that you don't damage that little tube, because then that'll just cause you more problems later on. But if you've got your repair kit, you should have your valve core tool handy. You can depress that valve core to go ahead and fire the shot, or loosen the valve core if the gun is only discharging air partially. All right, so you can take steps to go ahead and manually fire the gun. And so once you do that, then we suggest you go ahead and get the gun off the well, send it in to us so that everyone can get that repaired for you. Other reasons your gun won't fire. All right, so here we have a dart valve assembly. So this dart valve assembly has been completely rusted in place. Looks pretty bad. So one thing you can do to try to clean that, spray cleaner into that assembly and just let it soak. See if you can get that cleaned up a little bit. Clean each component separately, reassemble it. And this is what we like for it to look for when it goes back inside the gun. So if you've got it pretty heavily damaged and you're not able to clean it up, then you might want to call us and have us send you a new part there. So this is a close-up of the dart valve assembly. Here's the plunger housing, plunger spring. There's the dart valve and the plunger. And so we've heard people say, if you're in the field and you're doing this repair, be very careful and aware that that plunger spring is right there inside that housing, because you'll take that assembly out and you'll hear a little ping, and that'll be your spring that's gone forever. So make sure that you're careful. be very cautious and be aware of all the little components whenever you're doing repairs, especially in the field. All right, if your gun is firing or discharging air partially, all right, so this is the gas valve that has to move up and down that gas valve chamber, all right, so we want it to have a good seal before you fire the shot. So here you see this gas valve. Look at these O-rings have been completely destroyed here. But if your gun is firing or discharging only partially, there was still half the pressure on the gun. It could be that your gas valve is completely dried out and it's not moving all the way up and down. It's getting stuck. So you want to remove and clean the gas valve, replace those O-rings, make sure that you apply high temperature grease on the gas valve, the O-rings, and the gas valve chamber before reassembling it. You want to make sure that it's able to move freely and not get stuck for the best gun operation. If your gun feels slowly, you may have a plugged valve body filter, orifice filter, or plugged restrictor. Here's some pictures of a plugged valve body screen. So where is that located? So there's your filler connector housing. You've got an O-ring, valve core. There's your valve body. This is where that screen is connected. All right. So here's where it's been completely clogged up. This is what a nice clean one looks like. Here's some pictures of a plugged orifice, or the orifice screen there. This can be caused by not pressuring the gun prior to opening the well valve. Spray cleaner where the screen is located. Blow compressed air on the opposite end. All right, so this is what we're looking at right here. So that first little bit of pressure presses down on the gas valve. The rest of it goes up through this tiny little hole into the volume chamber. So you want to make sure that that's in good condition. And if you look right here, there's a tiny little screen. That's what we're talking about here. Make sure that that screen is nice and clean. Here's a plugged restrictor. So if the gun doesn't pressure when you're using the hose connector, replace the restrictor. All right, so that one's kind of full of gunk there. What if your gun leaks? All right, if it's leaking out the bottom of the gun, the bleed port, or the bleed valve port. Okay, so if it's leaking out the bottom of the gun, could be caused by a missing or cut O-ring. Remove the gas valve and inspect those O-rings for cuts. Make sure that you're using the right O-ring replacement. So here you see the yellow dot, nice green check mark there, and use the high temperature grease to minimize failures. All right, here we have the bleed port. This is caused by dry O-ring. Make sure you're applying grease to your O-rings prior to installing the plunger housing. All right, here's a nice close-up of the dart valve like we saw in that video too. Want to make sure that that's clean. So here you have a picture, just this tiny little bit of dirt here, this tiny little bit of debris accumulated causes problems. It's very important that it's nice and clean. This is the dart valve seat. There's some big gouges here. These gouges are causes for leaks. And so if you've got something damaged like this, you see some gouges or some pitting, make sure and get that replaced. It should be nice and clean. So here's the bleed valve port. Again, we're seeing some pitting here. All right, so remove it, clean it, inspect it for pitting. If you see pitting, you're going to want to let us know so we can send you a replacement part. All right, dirty valve core. Make sure that those are in good condition. We've seen some come back in where only half of it's there. So make sure that those valve cores are clean, that they're in good condition. All right, my microphone doesn't work. This can be caused by user error, or it could be a maintenance issue. You hit that take shot button and there's nothing. You just see this waiting for shot. All right, we're not seeing any register of the microphone. So here's one maintenance issue. Edwin, do you want to tell us what happened here?
Yes, this customer called in and he said, hey, I'm not having any response on my microphone. So I had him check it, and I said, I did the bump test and he's not having any response at all. So I had him send it to us for repair. And this is what happened. I think they were trying to remove the microphone. And if you look at it closely on the electrical tube, you'll see like a small nut. So I think what happened was the microphone protector was heavily rusted, where you're gonna see it in a couple of minutes here.
Yeah.
And they tried to remove the microphone protector without removing the microphone first. So what happened is when they moved the mic protector, the mic actually moved and cut the electrical tube and cut the electrical wiring inside the tube and caused the dental effect.
All right. One of the things that you can do, and so what Edwin is showing us here, is you can he was talking about bumping the gun. So you can tap the bottom of the gun if you have it connected to TAM and see if you've got a response. So you should see a response here. All right, so to test, depressurize the gun, remove the gun from the well, lay it on its side, initialize TAM, turn on the gun, start a new test, and fire the gun when the take shot is ready. You don't have to have pressure on the gun, right? So you're just bumping the bottom of the gun to initiate the shot being fired, or if you just tap on it, you'll see that microphone response. It's the same kind of thing as using that test cap, all right? But you can just use your hand. So if the mic's working, you'll see the response there. All right, some common maintenance issues. So here is the microphone was locked in by rust, and so this was after the microphone was removed. And this might be the one that Edwin was talking about.
Yep.
Here's the dart valve seat. All right, you can see that's in bad condition. Here, the dart valve assembly is rusted. Here we see a worn orifice and a clogged orifice. All right, so these are all parts that would need to be replaced. The filler connector tube is bent here. The dart valve seat in this picture is clogged, right? You can see a bunch of gunk inside there. Here we have another dart valve seat that's gouged. Plunger housing O-rings, make sure that your O-rings are the right size. Make sure that you're lubricating them so they don't dry out. There was the damaged valve body. You also want to watch galling on threads. You want to make sure that you're keeping your threads in good condition and using some type of Teflon tape, thread protectors. And on those mic protectors, kind of like we really saw in that video from Rusty, if you've got damaged threads or rusted threads, you want to make sure that you replace that microphone protector. That way you've got a good, safe connection between the gun and the well. All right, recommended do's and don'ts. Never submerge your wireless equipment in any form of liquid. Do not use brake cleaner on your equipment. Do not use carburetor cleaner, and do not use B12. And usually whenever we say do not use B12, we get this sort of collective gasp from the class. And you may not see the effects of using harsh chemicals or B12 right away, but after some time, it will cause some maintenance issues on your equipment. All right, so this is a battery that was, you see some pitting, and these were effects from B12, swollen O-rings. So it does make a difference, and it can cause some damage. So use an electronics cleaner degreaser, spray it onto a rag, and then wipe your equipment down. Do not spray it directly on the battery case, the membrane switch, or the antenna. You want to make sure that you see the words safe on plastic and rubber. If you don't see those words, don't use that chemical on your wireless equipment. So you can use the same method to keep the mylar on your microphone clean and free of debris. If you remove the microphone from the gun, do not spray anything down into the microphone housing where the electrical pin is located. Recommended grease. All right, so we have what our technicians use. This Mystic number 2, it can be purchased at your local auto parts store. WD-40 or similar products should not be used on the O-rings. Chapstick or Carmex is not a grease. All right, there's a good tip. All right, so the gun drawings are located inside that PDF bundle and also on our website. You can download any of the maintenance guides and the drawings for each one of the guns that we have. Any questions so far before I switch over to the well analyzer?
Yeah, at the beginning there was a comment from William saying he was charging his Power Pro, it's a wireless Power Pro, having 77% of charge. It got disconnected and he was not able to turn it back on. So it's totally dead and no green light. He retried what Ken was asking for, just pushing that on-off button for 30 seconds or longer, but it didn't work. So I'm assuming he will have a major problem on the power probe, and it will need to be sent to us. Another comment is actually there are two questions related to gas guns being used on an H2S environment. And one question from Fowler is, working under H2S production, should I use a special type of O-ring? And there are more questions, so I will let Ken and Edwin to reply on that. Is how frequent should a remote fire gas gun be maintained, assuming we're shooting a regular 20 shots per day and working in the H2S environment with 80 to 220 ppm.
The gas guns are made out of annealed 316 stainless steels, and that type of steel is resistant to H2S. And the 5000 K, the 5K wired and wireless gas guns that are ATEX certified also have certification sheets for use with H2S. But we don't change the O-rings out in those guns. We just make sure that the valves, the metal is all annealed 316 stainless steel. So I don't think that we need to worry. The O-rings that we use are AFLAS, and they have a good life with CO2. So I think we have the correct O-ring type. I don't think there's any different O-ring that you would use for H2S.
Yes, and all the guns are built on the same material, and you might see some corrosion after extended period of time just on the microphone protector, which is the only non-stainless steel part of it. Just keep a focus on that. And
the microphone protector is just standard steel. It's disposable, and it has a cadmium coating on it.
Yeah, and even on H2S environments, by keeping just using the regular dielectric spray on it will keep it clean. So just giving a quick quote of that after every usage, and that should help a lot on not having any problem on H2S. Andres is asking, Andres has hot wells, steam injection wells, and he's asking about, he sees the critical moment for the non-metallic pieces in the gun is the build-up time. So that regular 2 minutes time on the build-up. I would like you to cover something about, because we have high temperature microphones available for those applications, which are available based on special requests. So can any one of you guys please jump in and tell us about the microphone for high temperature, please?
Yeah. On that, there's a recommendation. If you keep a gas gun on the well until it reaches a certain temperature, the Velcron, I think, that's in the gun will melt. So it's recommended that you do not keep the gun on the well where it's going to exceed that I think it's 350 degrees where that Velcron will start melting. So there's people that have used gas guns in that type of situation where they just keep it on the wellhead, and they might have some type of a bucket of ice or something like that with them that they can cool down the gun after they take the gun off the well. What he was asking was there is something that we do have. It's called a high temp microphone, and it has metal plates on the microphone which does give it it's not still with the plates on with the metal plates, it still can't, because there's other components inside of the gun that will melt. So it's still recommended not to leave the gas gun on the wellhead just minimum time whenever you exceed that 350 degrees. Hopefully that answered some of your questions. We've got some literature on that. If you email myself, ken@echometer.com, I can share that information with you.
Yes, and this was also asking if we have think on a different kind of gas gun design, like if we could seal the path to the microphone and having a kind of a bypass to the pressure transducer to allow him to continue acquiring build-up pressure for a longer time. But just probably he's just using the regular microphone, and he could have more chances to extend the time where the gas gun is installed in the well by having this special microphone. It has an extra layer of protection for the microphone. And not saying that will be in the well for an extended period, because I can say there are other components aside the microphone that may be damaged. Another question from Lupe is regarding the clear channel assessment. And she's asking if the clear channel works with multiple transducers connected at once. And well, that will depend on what kind of clear channel assessment you're running. If you're running a basic clear channel, it checks all the channels for the noise that is present at that point. But if you run an advanced clear channel, that will look for how much data is lost between the base and one specific sensor. So it will check that specific sensor and run all the channels through it. So they are different depending on which clear channel she's referring to. Some other questions has been answered regarding what pressure may cause the debris to enter into the chamber. I tried to answer that on the chat by trying to get clear on even a low amount of pressure in the well. If you open the valve connecting the gas gun to the wellhead, even low amount of pressure will be able to push debris inside the gas gun if you have no pressure in the volume chamber. So that's why it's highly recommended to always pressurize the gas gun before opening the valve connecting the gas gun to the wellhead to avoid the well pressure pushing the debris into the gun. There's a comment that can turn into a question: is why or when would we need to manually fire a remote fire gas gun? That this can be dangerous. So, Karian, could you go back and tell us when is it necessary, or why would it be necessary to manually fire a gun?
Right. So when there's a failure on the gun, we've just had so many times that operators have called in and said, my gun won't fire. You know, there's something wrong with the gun. Something is preventing the gun from operating properly. And so now they have a gun with, 6 or 7, however many hundreds of pounds of pressure. They have this gun that's loaded with this pressure that will not fire. And so under these circumstances, yes, we would absolutely prefer that you not fire the gun manually. The remote fire gun was not meant to be that way. But in the event that you have a gun with pressure on it that won't fire, this is a way for you to make the gun safe, if you need to send it into us for repair. We've had guns come in the mail for repair with 800 pounds of pressure on them, so we want to make sure that you know how to make your gun safe. And so this is the best possible way. You want to make sure that it's secure, make sure that the bottom of the gun is pointed away from people or objects or anything that it might be able to blow that pressure against and damage or move. And so that way you can safely fire the gun, and then you're able to transport it wherever you need to transport it or ship it to us for repair. So thank you for asking that question so that we could clarify that.
Yes, another thing that they might try, it takes longer, and is pushing that other filler connector, that the ones that's used for permanent connections, the other quick connector. Just
This one.
we have the cap on it right now.
Right.
We can't see the connector itself, but just by pushing that, it will take longer depending on how much pressure you have in the chamber, but you can also decrease or bleed the pressure in the chamber by pushing that connector.
Question.
We have a compliment from Dr. Podio regarding the temperature on the microphone. So the other problem with the high temperature is that the piezoelectric crystals, which is the microphone used in the microphone, are affected by temperature, and their sensitivity decreases as the temperature increases. This makes the amplitude and the liquid level echo to be difficult to detect. So I think bottom line is the hotter the microphone is, we are losing sensitivity, and we might not be able to see the liquid level clicks or the color count. Is there a limit of the, I think it's a delta pressure, when imploding into a 5K gas gun to not damage anything? Is there any limit when you're shooting an implosion pulse? Is there any limit on the differential pressure when using a 5K gun in order to not damage anything?
We recommend to try to use no more than 1,000 psi of differential pressure for the 5K gun. But it's safe to shoot at a higher pressure, but it may cause there's a nylon bushing in there on the firing valve, and if you use a really high differential pressure, you may have to replace that valve because that nylon will be damaged and leak.
You think is that it so far?
Yes, Ken already answered another question from Jesus Mata asking for where to set in the configuration in the TAM software when we are doing an implosion pulse. And he already explained how to get into the details button and selecting either an explosion or an implosion pulse. It's the same place where you selected in a tubing or a casing shot. That's a TAM software related question.
Great. All right, I know we're running short on time, so I did want to talk just a little bit about the well analyzer. Many of you are using the well analyzer, both with TWM and with TAM. So when it comes to troubleshooting the well analyzer, in the TWM software, we have something on the equipment check tab called the Troubleshoot Wizard. And so I have that's the slide that you see here. So when you're in the acquire mode of the TWM software and you go to the equipment check tab and you're connected, so when you're connected to the well analyzer, you see the blue bars, you see the information. This is also where you can look if you're wondering what features your well analyzer has been licensed to use, for as far as acquiring plunger lift data, pressure transient, things like that. But the one thing I wanted to sort of draw your attention to was the Troubleshoot Wizard. And so the TAM software does not have this Troubleshoot Wizard built into the software right now. But it is kind of a neat tool to be able to check your well analyzer and to check your cables. So for this reason, this may be a reason that you might have to go ahead and download the TWM software. Or if you're still using the laptop you got from us, I think we still put it on all the laptops anyway. So it's the TWM software. Okay, thank you. So when you hook up your well analyzer and you go to the equipment check tab, you'll see this Troubleshoot Wizard here. And so you click on that button. And the first thing that troubleshooting pop-up is going to do is to tell you to turn the analyzer off and then turn it back on again. And I want to draw your attention to this little panel right here. So here's your power on and off switch, and then you have these 3 lights. So these are all related to your battery function, right? So the battery OK light should always turn on and be on if you have the well analyzer turned on. The external battery light will only turn on if you have the auto charger plugged into your cigarette lighter and you have that 3-pin connector plugged into the back of the well analyzer. That's an external battery power. And while I'm on that topic, if you have the auto charger plugged into your well analyzer. There's a power adapter at the back of the well analyzer with a laptop cable coming off of that. While you have that plugged into your computer, that's the only configuration where you can charge both the well analyzer and the laptop simultaneously. All right, so back to the wizard. Turn it off, turn it on again. Click next. So the software will do a diagnostic check of the processor, sort of the internals in the well analyzer. If everything's okay, you'll see this nice big green check mark. If there's a problem, you'll see a red X, and it will say you need to get in touch with Echometer. And so our technician who works on the well analyzers, his name is Jeff. Jeff can help give you some troubleshooting tips and kind of talk you through if you're having a problem with your well analyzer. So you click next, and the next thing it's going to do is a voltage check of your battery. So if you'll notice right here, the battery voltage should be between 10.5 and 14 volts. So if the battery power drops below about 10.5 volts, say you've got your well analyzer hooked up and you're ready to take a shot and you see communication, everything looks good, but you go to fire the shot and the shot fails, check your battery power. If it's 10.5 or lower, you've got enough power to have everything turned on and communicate, but you don't have enough power to send that 12 volts, through your cable to the solenoid. All right, so you want to make sure that you've got good battery power. Now, the next thing it's going to do is check your cables. Okay, so there's a test panel. So if you've never really been sure what that panel is for, when you open up your well analyzer box underneath your power switch, you see this 6-pin connector, and then a little looks like a microphone cable connector, and then a test button. And so this is a little test panel. This is where we're going to plug your cables in, one side to the top of the well analyzer and then the other to the side of the well analyzer where you would normally plug in when you're acquiring data. So the first test it's going to do, the first check is going to be your microphone cable. So you'll plug one end of the microphone cable into the top of the well analyzer and the other end to the side where you would normally plug it in when you acquire data, and click next. Now we're going to plug in the solenoid cable, your transducer cable. All right, so you plug that 6-pin connector that you would normally have plugged into your pressure transducer, or if you've got a coil cable that you would normally have piggybacked onto that, and you've got your load cell or your PRT, that's what you're plugging in, is that 6-pin connector that would plug into one of your sensors that goes on the top of the box. So now when we click next, it's going to first do a check of your microphone cable. And so you'll see this thin line, this thin green line going across the center of the screen. So you want to press that little test button and hold it, and you should see that signal pop up. And this is what you want it to look like. All right, so if you press that button and there's no signal response, then you've likely got a bad microphone cable. So then you click next. Now it's going to check your solenoid cable. All right, so you see two different displays here. So you want to make sure when you first start out, you should see both lines right there at the 0 going across the screen here. When you press that test button, it's going to simulate a load being applied, and you should see both of these windows, both of those lines pop up and hold for as long as you have that button pressed. When you let go, they should both drop down. If you see one of them start out at that 1 millivolt per volt, if you've got a shorted out cable or you see no response, then that's going to be an indication that you've got a damaged cable. So this is a way that you can check both of your cables. You can piggyback your coil cables onto that to check your coil cables. Make sure if you do that you stretch that coil cable out. When it's on the well and the well's operating, it's stretching those cables out. You can do that when you have it hooked up, in this cable checker troubleshoot wizard. So again, this isn't in TAM, but it's in TWM, and so it's just a good way for you to be able to check your cables on that. So that is what we have for you today, and I'm down to 1 minute. So I want to thank Edwin for sitting in with us, and Edwin and Ken both for all of their help and advice and tips, and we sure appreciate your support. And we thank all of you guys for joining us today. And if you have any follow-up questions, please send them in. Next week, we're going to talk about shooting fluid levels on difficult wells, and so some tips, all different kinds of wells, gas lift wells, wells with multiple reflection kicks, things like that. So please join us next week. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.